Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. In this video, we'll be exploring the rich and complex story of Islam in this Iberian nation, from its historical roots to its present-day reality. We'll start by delving into the fascinating history of Islam in Portugal, tracing its spread from the 8th century through the period of Muslim rule and beyond. Then we'll examine the current demographics of Muslims in Portugal, looking at population numbers and the breakdown between Sunni and Shia communities. Our journey will then take us into the daily lives of Portuguese Muslims. We'll explore their activities, occupations, and where they primarily reside in the country. Following that, we'll address the challenges faced by the Muslim community in Portugal, from legal recognition to social integration. Finally, we'll tackle the sensitive but important topic of Islamophobia in Portugal. We'll look at whether it exists, what forms it might take, and how it's being addressed by both the Muslim community and Portuguese society at large. This exploration will give you a well-rounded understanding of the Muslim experience in Portugal, highlighting both the progress made and the challenges that remain. So let's begin our journey through the past and present of Islam in Portugal. Firstly, let us go deeper into the history of Islam in Portugal. It's a story that goes back over 1,300 years and has left an indelible mark on Portuguese culture, language, and architecture. The Islamic presence in what's now Portugal began in 701 CE. That's when Tariq ibn Ziyad, a Berber commander, led Muslim forces across the Strait of Gibraltar and into the Iberian Peninsula. Within just a few years, these forces, composed mainly of Berbers and Arabs, had conquered most of the peninsula, including the area that would become Portugal. This conquered territory became part of the Islamic world, known as Al-Andalus. The western part of the peninsula, roughly corresponding to modern Portugal, was called Algarve, which means the west in Arabic. Interestingly, this name survives today in the Algarve, Portugal's southernmost region. Under Islamic rule, cities like Lisbon, then called Al-Ushbuna, Silvas, and Murtala, flourished. They became important centers of learning, culture, and trade. The Muslims introduced new agricultural techniques, including irrigation systems that transformed the landscape. They also brought new crops like rice, citrus fruits, and cotton, which had a lasting impact on Portuguese agriculture and cuisine. This period of Islamic rule wasn't constant or uniform. There were different dynasties, internal conflicts, and varying relationships with the Christian kingdoms to the north. The Umayyad Caliphate, the Almoravids, and the Almohads all ruled at different times, each leaving their mark on the region's culture and architecture. Speaking of architecture, you can still see Islamic influences in Portugal today. The Castle of Silves, with its red sandstone walls, is a prime example of Islamic military architecture. In Murtola, the main church was actually a mosque that was converted after the Christian reconquest. You can still see the mihrab, the prayer niche that indicates the direction of Mecca. But the tide began to turn in the 11th century with the start of the Reconquista, the Christian reconquest of the Iberian Peninsula. For the next few centuries, Islam had very little visible presence in Portugal. It wasn't until the 20th century, with the collapse of the Portuguese colonial empire and subsequent waves of immigration, that Muslim communities began to re-establish themselves in the country. So that's the historical background, a story of conquest, cultural exchange, conflict, and eventual expulsion, followed by centuries of absence and then a gradual return. It's a complex history that has shaped Portugal in countless ways and continues to influence the country's relationship with its Muslim citizens today. When it comes to the Muslim population in Portugal today, we're dealing with some interesting challenges in terms of getting precise numbers. You see, Portuguese law actually prohibits collecting census data based on religion. This policy is meant to prevent discrimination, but it does make it tricky to get exact figures on religious communities. That said, we're not completely in the dark. Various surveys, studies, and estimates from Muslim organizations give us a pretty good picture of the situation. According to these sources, the current Muslim population in Portugal is estimated to be between 65,000 and 75,000 people. Now in a country of about 10.3 million, that translates to roughly 0.6% to 0.7% of the total population. It's worth noting that this is a significant increase from just a few decades ago. In the 1980s, estimates put the Muslim population at around 15,000. So we're looking at a growth of over 400% in about 40 years. This growth is largely due to immigration, but also includes some conversions and natural population increase. Now, let's break this down a bit further. When we talk about Muslims in Portugal, we're not talking about a monolithic group. The community is quite diverse, with people coming from various ethnic, cultural, and national backgrounds. The largest group of Muslims in Portugal are of Guinean origin, mainly from Guinea-Bissau, a former Portuguese colony in West Africa. They make up about 45% of the Muslim population. Next, you have Muslims of Moroccan origin, accounting for around 15%. Then there are significant communities from Bangladesh, Pakistan, and Mozambique, another former Portuguese colony. There's also a small but growing number of Portuguese converts to Islam. It's hard to get exact numbers, but some estimates suggest there might be around 2,000 to 3,000 Portuguese converts. When it comes to the split between Sunni and Shia Muslims, the vast majority in Portugal are Sunni. We're talking about 90% or more of the Muslim population. Sunni Islam is the largest branch of Islam worldwide, so this isn't surprising. The Shia community in Portugal is quite small. The most significant Shia group is the Ismaili community, most of whom came from Mozambique after it gained independence in 1975. The Ismailis are a subsect of Shia Islam, and they have a well-organized community in Portugal, with their own places of worship and community centers. It's also worth mentioning that there's a small Ahmadiyya community in Portugal. The Ahmadiyya are a minority Islamic movement that isn't recognized as Muslim by many mainstream Muslims, but they self-identify as Muslim. In terms of geographical distribution, the Muslim population is heavily concentrated in urban areas, particularly in and around Lisbon. The Greater Lisbon area is home to more than half of Portugal's Muslims. You'll also find significant Muslim communities in Porto, the country's second largest city, and in Faro in the Algarve region. One interesting trend to note is that the Muslim population in Portugal is relatively young compared to the general population. This is partly due to the fact that many Muslims are first or second generation immigrants, and partly because immigrant communities often have higher birth rates than the native population. Despite the growth we've seen in recent decades, it's important to put these numbers in context. Muslims still make up a very small minority in Portugal. By comparison, in neighboring Spain, Muslims make up about 4% of the population. In France, it's estimated to be around 8 to 9%. However, the Muslim community in Portugal is growing and becoming more visible. There are now over 50 mosques and prayer rooms across the country, up from just a handful in the 1980s. The community is also becoming more organized, with various Islamic associations and cultural centers being established. Let's dive into what everyday life looks like for Muslims in Portugal. It's a picture of integration, challenges, and maintaining religious and cultural traditions in a predominantly Catholic and increasingly secular society. First off, it's important to understand that the Muslim community in Portugal is well integrated in many ways. You'll find Muslims working across various sectors of the Portuguese economy. They're doctors, engineers, teachers, shopkeepers, restaurateurs, and everything in between. Many run their own businesses, particularly in areas like retail and food service. Education is a big part of daily life for many in the community. Muslim children generally attend Portuguese public schools, where they mix with children from various backgrounds. However, there are also weekend Islamic schools, often associated with mosques, where children can learn about Islam, Arabic, and their cultural heritage. Speaking of mosques, they play a central role in the life of the community. The Central Mosque of Lisbon, inaugurated in 1985, is the largest and most prominent. It's not just a place of worship, but also a cultural center that organizes events, lectures, and activities for both Muslims and non-Muslims. On Fridays, you'll see it bustling with activity for the main weekly prayer. But it's not just in Lisbon. There are now dozens of mosques and prayer rooms across Portugal, from Porto in the north to Faro in the south. These serve as community hubs, places for prayer, celebration, and coming together. During Ramadan, the holy month of fasting, the community becomes particularly visible. For Eid al-Fitr and Eid al-Adha, the two major Islamic festivals, some Muslims in Portugal take days off work to celebrate with their families. While these aren't public holidays in Portugal, many employers are becoming more accommodating of these religious observances. In terms of where Muslims live, as mentioned earlier, they're predominantly in urban areas. The Moraria neighborhood in Lisbon, for instance, has a significant Muslim population. Here, you'll find halal butchers, Islamic bookshops, and cafes where older men gather to chat and play cards. Interestingly, some areas are associated with specific national origins. For example, the Martim Moniz area in Lisbon has a large Bangladeshi Muslim community, while in certain parts of the Algarve, you'll find more Moroccan Muslims. When it comes to dress, most Muslims in Portugal dress in typical Western clothing. However, it's not uncommon to see women wearing hijabs, especially in areas with larger Muslim populations. Full-face veils like the niqab or burqa are rare but not unheard of. Many Muslims in Portugal maintain connections with their countries of origin or ancestral homelands. It's common for families to travel back home during summer holidays or for important family events. This helps in maintaining cultural ties and traditions. Interfaith marriages are becoming more common, especially among younger generations. This often leads to interesting cultural fusions and can sometimes be a source of tension with more traditional family members. In the political sphere, while there aren't many high-profile Muslim politicians in Portugal, Muslims are becoming more engaged in local politics and civil society organizations. There are several Islamic associations that work to represent the community's interests and promote interfaith dialogue. It's worth noting that many Portuguese Muslims say they feel at home in Portugal. They appreciate the country's generally tolerant attitude and the fact that Portugal doesn't have the same level of tension around Muslim integration that you might see in some other European countries. However, daily life isn't without its challenges. Some Muslims report experiencing occasional discrimination or misunderstanding, particularly in smaller towns or rural areas where there's less diversity. Balancing religious obligations with work or school can sometimes be tricky, especially during Ramadan or for Friday prayers. Despite these challenges, the overall picture is one of a community that's becoming an increasingly integral part of Portuguese society. They're maintaining their faith and traditions, while also adapting to and shaping Portuguese culture in their own ways. It's a dynamic, evolving situation that reflects the broader changes in Portuguese society as it becomes more diverse and multicultural. While Portugal is generally considered to be one of the more tolerant European countries when it comes to its Muslim population, the community still faces a number of challenges. Let's break these down and explore them in more depth. One of the most significant issues is the lack of official recognition of Islam as a religion by the Portuguese state. Now, this doesn't mean that Muslims can't practice their faith. Freedom of religion is guaranteed by the Portuguese Constitution. However, Islam doesn't have the same legal status as Catholicism or some other faiths that have concordats with the state. This lack of official recognition can create practical problems. For example, it makes it more difficult to secure public funding for Islamic schools or to have Islamic religious education in public schools. It also complicates matters when it comes to having Muslim chaplains in hospitals, prisons, or the military. While there have been some improvements in recent years, this remains an ongoing challenge. Another issue is the preservation of Islamic cultural heritage. Portugal has a rich Islamic history, but many Muslims feel that this isn't adequately recognized or preserved. There have been calls for better protection and restoration of Islamic historical sites, and for more emphasis on Islamic contributions to Portuguese culture in education and public discourse. Employment discrimination is another challenge that some Muslims in Portugal face. While it's illegal to discriminate based on religion, some Muslims report difficulties in finding jobs, especially if they wear visible religious symbols like the hijab. This can be particularly challenging for new immigrants who may also face language barriers. Housing can also be an issue. Some Muslims have reported difficulties in renting apartments, especially in smaller towns or more conservative areas. This can lead to a concentration of Muslim populations in certain neighborhoods, which can sometimes reinforce feelings of segregation. The building of new mosques has occasionally been a source of tension. While Portugal doesn't have the same level of controversy around this as some other European countries, there have been instances of local opposition to mosque construction projects. This can make it difficult for growing Muslim communities to find adequate places of worship. For Muslim youth, balancing their Islamic identity with Portuguese culture can be challenging. Many young Muslims, especially those born or raised in Portugal, find themselves navigating between the traditional values of their parents and the secular norms of Portuguese society. This can sometimes lead to intergenerational conflicts within families. Education is another area where challenges arise. While Muslim students generally attend public schools, there can be issues around accommodating religious practices. For example, providing halal food options in school canteens or allowing time off for religious holidays are not always straightforward. Media representation is a concern for many in the community. Some feel that Islam and Muslims are often portrayed negatively or stereotypically in Portuguese media, which can reinforce misconceptions and prejudices among the general public. The rise of far-right movements across Europe has also caused concern among Portuguese Muslims. While Portugal hasn't seen the same level of far-right success as some other countries, there's worry about the potential for increased Islamophobia if these movements gain traction. For Muslim women who wear the hijab or other visible religious symbols, there can be additional challenges. Some report feeling more vulnerable to discrimination or harassment, particularly in areas with less diversity. Another issue is the lack of halal certification standards in Portugal. While there are halal products available, there's no official body regulating halal certification, which can create confusion and challenges for Muslims trying to adhere to dietary restrictions. Access to Islamic finance products is limited in Portugal, which can be a challenge for Muslims who wish to engage in financial transactions in accordance with Islamic principles. Lastly, the COVID-19 pandemic has presented new challenges. Lockdowns and social distancing measures have affected communal prayers and community gatherings, which are important aspects of Muslim religious and social life. The economic impact of the pandemic has also hit some segments of the Muslim community hard, particularly those working in sectors like hospitality and retail. It's important to note that while these challenges exist, many Portuguese Muslims also report positive experiences and a general feeling of acceptance in Portuguese society. The situation is complex and evolving, with ongoing efforts from both the Muslim community and broader Portuguese society to address these issues and promote greater understanding and integration. When it comes to Islamophobia in Portugal, the situation is somewhat nuanced. Compared to some other European countries, Portugal has generally been seen as more tolerant and less prone to overt anti-Muslim sentiment. However, this doesn't mean that Islamophobia is entirely absent from Portuguese society. Let's start with the positives. Portugal doesn't have any prominent anti-Islam political parties or movements like you might see in countries such as France, the Netherlands, or Germany. There's no Portuguese equivalent to figures like Geert Wilders or Marine Le Pen, who have built political careers on anti-Muslim rhetoric. This lack of high-profile anti-Muslim voices in the political sphere has helped to keep Islamophobia from becoming a mainstream political issue. Moreover, Portugal's historical connection to Islam through its Al-Andalus period is often viewed positively. Many Portuguese people recognize and appreciate the Islamic influences in their culture, language, and architecture. This historical connection sometimes serves as a bridge for understanding and can contribute to a more positive perception of Islam. However, it would be inaccurate to say that Islamophobia doesn't exist in Portugal. While it may be less visible or less institutionalized than in some other countries, there are still issues that the Muslim community faces. For instance, there have been reports of discrimination in employment and housing. Some Muslims, particularly those who are visibly identifiable as Muslim, such as women wearing hijabs, have reported difficulties in finding jobs or renting apartments. This kind of discrimination is often subtle and can be hard to prove, but it's a real issue that affects people's daily lives. There have also been occasional incidents of anti-Muslim graffiti or vandalism, though these are relatively rare. In 2019, for example, there was an incident where anti-Muslim slogans were spray-painted on a mosque in Coimbra. While such overt acts are uncommon, they do occur and can be very distressing for the Muslim community. In terms of organized anti-Islam groups, while there aren't any large or prominent ones, there are small far-right groups that express anti-Muslim sentiments along with other xenophobic views. These groups are marginal and don't have significant public support, but their existence is a concern for the Muslim community. Media representation is another area where issues can arise. Some Muslims in Portugal feel that media portrayals of Islam and Muslims are often negative or stereotypical, focusing on issues like terrorism or presenting Islam as incompatible with Portuguese values. This can contribute to misunderstandings and prejudices among the general public. It's worth noting that global events and international media can also influence perceptions of Muslims in Portugal. On the institutional level, while there's no state-sponsored Islamophobia, some policies can indirectly affect Muslims. When it comes to combating Islamophobia, there are efforts from both within and outside the Muslim community. The Portuguese government has taken steps to promote religious tolerance and combat discrimination. For instance, there's the Commission for Religious Freedom, which works to protect religious rights and foster understanding between different faith communities. Muslim organizations in Portugal are also active in addressing Islamophobia. They work to educate the public about Islam, engage with media to provide accurate information, and advocate for the rights of Muslims. The Islamic community of Lisbon, for example, often speaks out against discrimination and works to promote a positive image of Islam in Portuguese society. Education is seen as a key tool in combating Islamophobia. There have been calls for more comprehensive education about Islam and its historical role in Portugal to be included in school curricula. Some universities now offer courses on Islamic studies, which can help to promote a more nuanced understanding of Islam among the general population. It's important to note that many Portuguese Muslims report feeling generally accepted in society. They often describe Portugal as a tolerant country where overt Islamophobia is rare. However, they also acknowledge that there's still work to be done in terms of promoting understanding and combating subtle forms of discrimination. In conclusion, while Portugal doesn't face the same level of Islamophobia seen in some other European countries, it's not entirely free from this issue. The situation is complex with both positive aspects and ongoing challenges. Efforts to combat Islamophobia and promote understanding are ongoing, involving government institutions, civil society organizations, and the Muslim community itself. As Portugal becomes increasingly diverse, these efforts will likely remain important in ensuring social cohesion and mutual respect between all members of society. Well, there you have it, folks. A journey through the rich tapestry of Muslim life in Portugal, from its ancient roots to the vibrant community of today. We've covered a lot of ground, from the Moorish influence that still echoes in Portuguese culture to the challenges and triumphs of modern Muslim communities across the country. I hope this video has given you a new perspective on the diversity and complexity of Portuguese society. Whether you're Muslim, Portuguese, both, or neither, understanding each other's stories is a crucial step towards building a more inclusive world. If you found this video informative or interesting, I'd really appreciate it if you could hit that subscribe button. I'm always working on new content that explores different cultures, communities, and histories, and I'd love to have you along for the ride. By subscribing, you'll be the first to know when I drop new videos like this one. Also, don't forget to leave a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this topic. Maybe you're a Muslim living in Portugal and have experiences to share, or perhaps you're just learning about this aspect of Portuguese society for the first time. Whatever your perspective, I'm looking forward to reading your comments and continuing this conversation. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Until then, stay curious and keep learning. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.